Hello, hello, hello. Okay. That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Hello, welcome to another Talks with Tyke today. It's Thursday, the 23rd, and thank you for joining us. As we get started here, we'll be talking about, again, that how connections and credentials often affect the hiring process. So kind of a neat idea to think about how your credentials and how your connectedness may play a role in your job, getting a new job, that sort of thing. So thanks for joining us today. I'm glad you can come along. So the first thing we're going to do is going to dive right into our PowerPoint presentation, and that should tell us a little bit about what we've been looking at here recently, and how that affects us in that area. So here it is. Wired versus hired, the employment wellness checkup that will make you question everything. So there is some tension in here, and that in itself is tension. But if you're credentialed and connected, and well credentialed and well connected, then what's what I call the holy grail of employment. And then that talk is a little bit different from the talk that we'll be talking about today. So the question that we're afraid to ask, the first slide here in our slide deck, does your diploma open the door, or does it sit on the desk while your phone does the actual work? In the labor market, 70% of jobs are never posted publicly. So we've done this before. And I'd like to really hammer this home that 70% of all the jobs never see the internet boards. And that is across the board for the well-credentialed and the well-connected. They don't fear that. The credential case. So let's take a look at that, what that looks like today. You have the median weekly earnings for a person that holds a bachelor's degree, and also the weekly earnings for a person with a high school or less than high school diploma. And you can see there's a more than 2 to 1 disparity there. The unemployment rate for someone holding a bachelor's degree is just north of 2%. And the unemployment rate for those without a high school diploma is 3 times more likely to impact them. So there's 50 years of evidence, and this was brought forth in Mark Grenebetter's Strength of the Weak Ties. We like to think that our connections are great ties, and they're the ones that are going to get us in the door, get us a seat at the table, and get us to that next job offer. But it's the weak ties that outperform the close friends in when it comes to job placement. So MIT and LinkedIn study of 20 million users, and of course, um, it was great for MIT and LinkedIn to get together because it's where the people come to, right? And they did that over 5 years, and it confirmed what Grunebetter had done, that weak ties drive career mobility, especially in digital sectors. And social capital functions as independent predictor of employment quality, separate from human capital. So the credential inflation, the great devaluation, Harvard Business School is making the US labor market measurably less efficient. Degree inflation is making the US labor market measurably less efficient. And 6 million middle school skills jobs at risk of degree inflation. 61% master's degrees holders are underemployed after 2 years after graduation. And the degree to task gap, 2 times jobs unchanged in scope, degree requirement doubled. And the skills based hiring, what we were told was supposed to happen may have happened only in print only. Uh, but the promise was 85% of employers claim that they are skills based hiring practices. Well, here's the reality. The reality is, um, of those making that claim, 85% of them, um, only 0.14% are affected by these degree removal policies. So it's done nothing. And the controversy over both models are rigged against you. And here is what that looks like. The credential trap, and there's a connection trap. The credential trap is that elite institutions provide merit signals inaccessible to first generation students. The degree inflation excludes 60% of adults who lack a 4-year degree. Underemployment among credentialed workers now exceeds 50%, so 1 out of every 2. And the connection trap looks a little bit different from a Yale study in 2023. Using connections is only legitimate when you already look the part. So if you're a plumber, it's tough to look like the economics professor, right? So higher class backgrounds produce higher value weak ties. That's compounding privilege. Uh, we connect with people like us, and that perpetuates exclusion. And of course, it wouldn't be a complete talk without when we contrast these two, the well credentialed and the well connected, we're looking for a holy grail of what that looks like. And what that looks like is if you're well credentialed and well connected, you can consider yourself part of that holy grail. You're you have legal cover for the hiring manager. You can get past the ATS screens if you're submitting online. You signal you're committed to a craft through your credentials, The well-connected, they bypass that black hole, so they don't have to worry about that. Internal referrals, they're 5 times, higher rate and access to unadvertised roles, so they're in the know. And here's the Machiavellian look at this. And again, the prince doesn't wait to be discovered, he positions. And when we use credentials as armor, so 2 parts here of armor and sword, and according to Machiavelli, you could deploy these together at the right time. So credentials don't get you hired. They keep you from being disqualified, though. And their legal cover for the hiring manager that says, okay, if someone questions the hiring manager, well, why did you hire this person? Well, he has a doctorate degree from Yale. And it also bypasses the insurance, right? So stack them strategically, but not obsessively. So when you use connections as a sword rather than a coat of armor, the connections get you in the room before the job's even posted. So you again you are in the know because you're making these social connections, and you have capital, social capital in this area. You're going to hear about these jobs before they ever see the light of the day on the internet. A war referral generates 5 times higher rate. So you build your network before you need it, and what Machiavelli called fortifying your position in peacetime. So deploying both the armor and the sword at the moment of decision, when the offer is on the table, um, you can use those both at the same time. So what is your next move? So we audit our network and we're looking name if you can name 5 people who could vouch for you today, are they in your target industry? Or are they scattered in different industries? Audit your credentials. Are your credentials matched to actual job requirements or just resume decoration? Close that gap. What one credential, one connection move could you make this week? And the Holy Grail test, if both models are class stratified, how are you building a path that isn't dependent on inherited access? And for um, that's kind of what the PowerPoint tells us today. And the talking points that I put together, um, I think, have relevance to this great debate whether we should be connected, whether we should be credentialed, or whether it's really in our best interest to pursue both of these endeavors, um, at the same time, or build these over the course of our employment um, history. So, what if the story we've been telling ourselves about credentials? Let's just talk about credentials. And that if you work hard, you get the right degree, the right certifications. What if that was only half the equation? What if the other half was a phone call that you never made? That tells a different story. So those two models represent, in my opinion, represent this one employment jungle. And the labor market has always operated on two parallel currencies that we'd have human capital in the game, what you know, what you've learned, that kind of thing, what your diploma certifies, and social capital, who you know, who vouches for you, who put your name in the room before the room even gets opened, right? So every career strategy either leans heavily on one, plays both, or most tragically, assumes the first is enough. Today we examine which model wins, which is going to be a tough talk, really, because it's hard to say one is greater than the other on balance. But if there's a clear winner, it must be called connectedness. But it's really not easy to get put that into its perspective. But what the data says when they compete and why the answer is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more complicated and more Machiavellian, believe it or not, than either camp admits. So that connectedness and that credentialed um, um, comes from two different areas, right? So the question really isn't credentials versus connections. The question is, which one do you reach for first? That's how do I do this? What do I do? And which one actually gets you hired? So, um, will a credential get you hired faster, or will a connection get you hired at the same rate or even faster, maybe even slower? I don't know. Look, but here's the case for the credential case. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2024, this data is unambiguous. Said the data is unambiguous on the wage premium of credentialing. If we looked at that in our slide deck. Um, so a person without a high school education was expected to earn um, greater than 2 times less than a person holding a bachelor's degree from university. And the unemployment rate kind of mirrors that as well. 2.2% for bachelor's holders versus 6.2, and that's that disparity. So on paper, if you just look what the paper says, that credentials are not just valuable, but they're the insulation. That's the protective. They're protective in that manner. So that can be your armor if you listen to what they're telling us at BLS. They'll keep you employed. They keep your income floor higher. Uh, but armor doesn't open those doors. So just something to think about. It just keeps you alive. Once you get in the room and once you're hired, that that degree and that credential will keep you there, but it won't get you there. So two different kind of discussions. And here's the case for a connection over half a century, 50 years, what that looks like from Grenovetter's 73 doctoral research. So and that's where the what we talked about earlier in the slide there um, about the strength of weak ties. And normally we think, oh, if I have a sibling, a close relative that's working at an institution where I'd like to work, then there's a really good chance I can get hired. And that's true. Uh, but here, Grenovetter's research showed that it's it goes even deeper than that. It goes it's closer to the weaker ties than it is to the stronger ties. Casual acquaintances, former colleagues, peripheral network contacts. Those are the kinds of people who are going to get you that job. They move in different circles. They carry different information. So if you're in an organization, say, hey, I know this guy, he's doing this. Oh, really? Why don't you bring him in and we'll have a talk? Or why don't you bring her in and she can tell us what she's been doing? So that is the idea behind the weak tie. Um, and we've talked before in similar talks with Tyke. We've had this credential inflation, and you know the in 2017, uh, Harvard Business School, they dismissed by degrees. It was a study. They documented a crisis that has only accelerated since then. Over 6 million middle class jobs are subject to degree inflation. 6 million. So adding the degree requirement to that role, we've also talked about that. We talked about that in our last talk. So this great, inflated idea that you need a college degree to do the work that's specified in the job requirements. Um, Probably not true. So we can debunk that myth right there. So we essentially have created this credentialing arms race where everyone keeps buying weapons that nobody knows how to use on the battlefield that actually exists. And then what we learned about in the slide deck about skills-based, the contradiction, that contradiction shows uh, you wonder if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of HR professionals, right? And hiring managers, and who say one thing in the press release and do something entirely different at the moment that you're hired, right? The question to ask your audience today, um, which version do you believe? The press release or the data? I mean, it's a fair question. What do you believe? Because they're probably not they're going to differ quite a bit. Uh, and but the next controversy that you hear about is that both of those models, both of the credentialing um, and uh, when both the credentialing I would say that with the credentialing and the connections, both of them are class stratified. And the academic fault line that most career coaches and the influencers refuse to touch. Neither credentials nor connections. They don't function as true merit filters. A Yale study back in 23 found that using connections to get a job is socially legitimized, as we saw in the slide deck, only when the candidate already presents the right signals of belonging. So again, if you're the welder, you're not expected to be the economics professor, right? So those different types of capital for the connected and for the credential, they look very differently. So the employment system isn't broken, which is a tough pill to swallow because it's working actually as it was intended to. So it's working, and it's working just like the people who designed it that they wanted it to work for. So if you don't fit either of those models, or you fit a little bit into those models, you're working in a system that probably did not have you in mind. And one of the fairest thing was to say, hey, look, if you hire for skills, we'll give you all the workers you need. Big company said, sure, we'll do it. Slide deck shows us less than 1% are actually doing what they said they were going to do. They got the press for it that never backed up their words in paper. So, coming back to this connectedness or connections versus credentials, and we look at what model today, if we were focused on a model here to model ourselves. Now, again, there's a different talk if we're talking about a well-credentialed, a well-connected individual with a very gritty person that has social capital as well as any other connected person or better. It also has the capital from various different institutions, right? So in today's climate, the frontiers in education they studied, the study of the graduate student employment is the most current synthesis. And we talk about social capital and human capital and how that interacts synergistically. So that combination produces the strongest employment quality outcomes on both subjective and objective measures. Neither alone is optimal. So you can't say, okay, I'll just take one or the other, but alone, um, they're not optimal. But the directionality matters. In practice, connections function at, as the activation mechanisms we talked about for credentials. So it activates your credential. Uh, it's an so a credential without a network to witness it goes unread. So and a network without credentials to validate it eventually runs dry of credibility. So that sequencing is build the network first. That's your sequence. Build your network first, then let the network amplify your credential. The research says it's not either or, but it also says if you can only do one thing this week, make one meaningful connection, because that's what actually moves the needle at the moment of hire. If you can do one thing, make it a connection. And the Machiavellian play here, and I'm getting to a point where not just to discuss tension, but look, there's a real world environment out there of a lot of people with high energy, a high willingness, a high aptitude, skills based person that may have had some challenges in their life from medical to family to personal, just many, many different ways that this can come about, probably much greater than we talked about today. That didn't follow that 18 to 22, that 18 to 25, and even that 18 to 28-year-old idea that they were going to spend 18 plus 8 years in school, and then be able to produce 40 years worth of employment. They're out there. And I think it's, genuine learning. I personally did not take that path. So, although I applaud their efforts, their grit, determination, the idea of knowing this at an earlier age and having somebody maybe even um, watching you, ascend in your career, I think that's a major factor. I think it's wonderful. Um, it's just not my story, but I think that is a wonderful story. I think people who take that path, I applaud. So, but the Machiavellian approach kind of looks like this: that we've talked about it before. You build your fortification during peacetime, right? So when the siege arrives, you're ready, right? When they come, you're ready. So when that comes to career strategy, when we talk about career strategy, the Machiavellian approach treats credentials as a defensive infrastructure. So that would be the armor that you're looking at, and the connection would be the sword, right? And the prince doesn't choose between those, the sword and the shield. He wants both, and then the idea to deploy both of those strategies at the right moment. And credentials justify the hire, and connections close that. So what you're looking at today, you want to stack your credentials strategically, but not obsessively. Build your network before You need it, right? That's your armor. And when the offer is on the table because of your sword, make sure someone in the room already knows your name and trust that. So, and what employers say versus what employers do, we kind of talked about that because they're saying one thing they're in print and they're doing another thing when the doors are closed. That gap between employee rhetoric and employer behavior is the most actionable insight in today's research canon. And in that whole canon, 76% of employers report that they were using the skills-based hiring. We looked at that, and 0.14% are actually doing something. So it's just not moving the needle. So read the job description. When you're looking at a job, read the job description. Then call somebody there who works there because the job description tells you what the machine is filtering for. And the phone call tells you what the human actually needs. So I'll leave you today with 3 questions that I wrote out, and the first one being on when we're talking about how to audit our own networks. And so our own network of people and places and institutions, name 5 people today who could put you or your name in front of a hiring decision. Someone in some, who can do that? Are they in industries that you've been targeting? If not, um, that's your work to do. Find that. The second question is on the credential audit, and look at the 3 roles that you want most. Where are they? What do they actually require of you? Are your credentials matched to the real requirement, or are you over credentialed for the wrong role? I recently applied for a position. The position in the interview was completely, almost entirely different from the job description. How do you plan for that? They told me I was articulate, I was this, I was that, and I was thinking to myself, but I'm not in the right job here. I'm not looking at the right job. The job that I responded to, the job that I applied to, did not look like this job. So make sure you're in the right role, or you're going to choose the right role. And the third question about the holy grail that we kind of touched on, where you have your high credential, your high connected um, connectedness. That is a different kind of story. So you may find yourself unemployed or out of the market, not necessarily by choice, even when you carry the social capital um, to meet the market capital, right? But you still may find yourself for whatever reason. It may be that you have an advanced degree or even a doctorate degree that you just haven't found the right place, and maybe it's going to take 6 months, a year and a half for you to find that right place. I don't know. So in closing though, but the employment jungle doesn't reward the most credentialed or the most connected in isolation. It doesn't happen in isolation. Um, it rewards a person who figured out how to be both and knew which one to reach for first. So whether armor or sword, the idea is that you know how to um, make that happen for your own self in there. So um, thanks for joining us today on Talks with Tyke. Thanks for stopping in. I hope this talk helped you and continues to help you to formulate a plan for a job, or hoping that some of these things can lead to your next job role. I do this personally, so I'm getting better acquainted. Um, And the more learning I do in this area, I do look at these as somewhat as um, uh, preemptive talks prior to interviews or just making connections. So I feel that these talks are going to help me in a grand sense over a period of time, and not just in today's world. So thanks again. Um, Next Tuesday, I'll have a topic. We'll put it back up on LinkedIn before that, and I will share today's slide deck on LinkedIn with you. And anyone looking for I have included the sources that for the materials that we talked about today, and cited those. So there's a page for that, and that's attached to this slide deck. So thank you. Thanks for coming out. I hope the talk today has helped you as much as it's helped me. And I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.